Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're so grateful this could happen. You know, Kenji Sensei has been taking advantage of the last Dharma talk and the remaining ones coming forward to offer a summation of some of the important things he's taught us through his years here at the Buddhist Temple of San Diego. And I can't think of a more important topic than the one we turn to today, which is the Nembutsu. So let's start the service by reciting the name of Amida Buddha. Kasho, Namo Amida Buddha, Namo Amida Buddha, Namo Amida Buddha, Namanda Samda. So Kenji Sensei asked me to chair this service in part because he's interested in expanding a little bit the format. Kenji Sensei is suggesting we add a little more ritual, like the full services we'd have at the temple if we were there in person. So today, for example, there will be a small chant, there'll be a reading and meditation, and other elements that we'll all remember pre-COVID. He also wanted me to apologize that we still have to do this. Originally, the temple planned to go ahead and have live services by now, especially as we're about to end the summer and move into fall. And we'll continue for the near future anyway of having online services, either by way of video or live with a Zoom type presentation where at least we can see each other's faces and have some community. And now we will welcome Kenji Sensei and allow me to thank you again for attending.
So we'll begin our Dharma service. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to him, the exalted one, the enlightened one, the supremely awakened one. Buddha saranam gacchami, Dhamma saranam gacchami, Sangam saranam gacchami. I go to the Buddha for guidance. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I go to the Sangha for guidance. Namo Kie Butsu. Namo Kie O. Namo Kie O. Dasho. Namo Amida Buddha. Namo Amida Buddha. Namo Amida Buddha. Namanda Samanda. I will read a short passage from Dr. Taitetsu Uno's book, followed by just a moment of silence. The fundamental purpose of the name as Namo Amida Buddha is awakening to the incomparable worth of this unrepeatable life. This limited, finite life that is inseparable from boundless, infinite life. A moment of silence. Gasho. Namo Amida Buddha. Namo Amida Buddha. Namo Amida Buddha. Namanda. Namanda. Good morning again. We begin and end every service and activity in Shin Buddhism with this phrase, Namo Amida Buddha. Shinran said that voicing this Nembutsu is the primary practice. So what is our experience when we say Namo Amida Buddha? Last week, we talked about what Buddhism was about. It's about waking up to true and real life. You know, how the world works and how we humans operate in the world. Waking up to life. It's not really about good and bad. And as I said, I'll read Dr. Taitetsu Uno's saying again. The fundamental purpose of the name as Namo Amida Buddha is awakening to the incomparable worth of this unrepeatable life. This limited finite life that is connected or inseparable from boundless infinite life. Another way of saying this is that by voicing Namo Amida Buddha, we realize that our single limited life is precious and worthy because somehow we are included in the incredible world and universe that is infinite. Let us think about that. Namo Amida Buddha wakes us up. The Buddha talks about the 6 realms, and I describe the states of mind that we can inhabit as humans. There's the hell, hungry ghost, animals, and then humans and even divas and demigods. Now, let's put ourselves in the lower realm, like the animal realm. Let's picture ourselves as an animal. You know, we had a dog named Leah, very happy puppy. It was a puppy, I'd say, for 10 years. Only in the last year of life did it seem old. And he was a very happy dog. Her name was Leah, named after, of course, Princess Leah, who was big at the time with my children. Now, for her, life was okay. You know, we gave her food, shelter, kids played with her, and I think she had a good life. But she had little control. And sometimes, don't you wonder what dogs think when they sit there? What are they thinking about? What do animals think about? Probably nothing. You know, she was born, she had a life, but it was determined by others. And then she passed away, she died. And some of us humans live like that. However, we have the ability to think more deeply. We can complain, but we can also enjoy life. We have the ability to wake up, to really know what life is about. That is what the Buddha's enlightenment was about. In a sense, we are bodhisattvas, beings with the potential of being Buddhas. In our hearts and minds, and our bodies and spirit, we have a connection to universal knowing, a connection with universal wisdom and compassion. The only beings with the gift of waking up to life. But like all animals, we struggle to live. We must eat, protect ourselves, find shelter, procreate, raise our young, and do all those things. Is that the only purpose of life? Of course, our parents teach us to survive. In my case, my father had a green grocery just before I was born. However, he lost everything in 1942 because as Japanese Americans, all were incarcerated in camps away from their home, and they lost everything that they owned. So after the war in 1945, they were unable to move back to California because they couldn't afford it. However, after a couple of years in Colorado, we moved back. And in 1947, he came back to San Jose, and then he worked in a green grocery, but as a clerk, not as the owner. And yet he never seemed bitter about that. And so as parents, they really struggle to make life better for us children. They tell us how important it is to get an education and to work and find work that's meaningful. It's good to have a good education, a good job, perhaps get a house, raise a family, all those things. And many of us are able to do that. And we realize that it's because of the efforts of others, our family, our teachers, and many other people who have supported us that made this possible. But even with all that, some of us think that there may be a meaning for life. And so we search for that. And we search for what life is all about. Now, the great teacher of mythology, Joseph Campbell, tells us this. He says, I don't believe people are looking for the meaning of life as much as they are looking for the experience of being alive. I think that Campbell means that when we experience being alive, is the same as what Dr. Reverend Uno said, that we realize our connection to infinite life. It's just not a thought in our heads. We feel alive. It's an experience. Let's take a moment to recall a time when we really felt alive. Recall a time when you were a child, something that you were rewarded for an achievement, or you were with a group of people you really enjoyed. Perhaps you were alone in nature, just a moment where you felt really alive. For me, that's driving in my Morgan, as I recounted a week or so ago, having the wind in my hair, bugs in my teeth. Now, I also enjoy long hikes in nature. It could be working hard in a project at the temple. So what can you recall? Recall a time when you felt really alive. I'm going to ring the bell and then be silent. So think back in your past, and it could be recent, but just think of a time where you really felt alive. I'll hit the bell and then be silent. That may have not been enough time, but I just wanted you to get a sense of a time when you really felt alive. Now, if we could connect that with the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Buddha, and that's why I say we need a practice. We need a practice of receiving, a practice of waking up, to realize all of these benefits around us that we have. Can a dog enjoy a sunset? Can a bird appreciate that his parents taught him how to build a nest? We humans can do this. And so the reasoning behind the practice that I've been saying of saying thank you, finding ordinary things to appreciate, is an introduction to the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Buddha. It becomes much broader and deeper in time. But we must begin with an experience that we're familiar with. And it's not an understanding, which is just something in our mind. The experience becomes a knowing. We know. Dr. Haneda, another great Shin scholar, says that the Namo in Namo Amida Buddha could mean bowing, bowing to a Buddha, Amida Buddha. It's a show of humility, a show of equality, being the same as other, a show of respect. So this bowing is something that in the East, many people do. Dr. Mark Blum talks about professional preachers in Japan, and they give performances like almost like a stand-up comic. They're very dramatic, sometimes comedic, very emphatic. But in the performance, as they give these Dharma talks, there's a deep lesson. And there was one talk about bowing and the two aspects. And there are two Japanese phrases. One is atama o sageru, and that means lower your head. Dr. Bloom was joking that politicians in Japan often bow their head and says, "Oh, please vote for me." And then there's this term onegai, asking a favor, and you bow your head. So this is very, intentional. There's a purpose. You're being, gracious, humble, but you're asking for something. And this is how we teach kids. When we teach them about appreciation, we say, When you get something, say thank you. Say thank you to grandma when she gives you a piece of candy. And so we begin to relate receiving something and expressing our appreciation by saying thank you. And the start of Japanese meals, most people put their hands together and say itadakimasu, really honoring the food that was given to us. So this thank you is a practice that is put into the culture and something we can all begin to accept. And now as adults, I suggest that we find thank yous all around us. That as we turn on the light or turn on a sink, we say thank you. But we add Namo Amida Buddha. Again, this is a practice. But this practice is like this term, atama o sageru, lower your head. It's intentional. It is practice that we continue. But when we have this calculation, we're showing others, even though we're saying thank you, that we have manners, that we're aware, that we appreciate things. Now, there's a second phrase that sounds almost like the first. And that in Japanese is atama ga sagaru. Atama ga sagaru. That means the head lowers. It just happens. It's natural. You don't lower your head just lowers. Now, what does that mean? It happens with experience, with the experience of life. Think of this. When you meet a great person, you might bow your head with great respect. Seeing the sunset, we might see sunsets, but at a certain time, it may impress us that this is really an experience of life. On TV, we might see acts of heroism. And so, again, we might just bow our heads. This is not a practice. The head just comes down. We are so impressed with life that, the words come out, Namo Amida Buddha. This is when we move from the practical to the spiritual. That all this practice of saying thank you, bowing our heads, something that's intentional practice, at some point, the head just lowers. We just let Namo Amida Buddha escape from our mouth. So it's difficult to get to a natural state without a practice. The present moment is most important. It's the now. It's the only moment we have. And waking up and appreciating it is what Buddhism is about. It's waking up to the efforts of others. So we practice gassho every time we come into the temple, start or end the meeting or service. We put our hands together and say Namo Amida Buddha. It's kind of intentional. We say thank you. But someday, your head will just lower itself. Namo Amida Buddha will really spring out of your mouth. And I think many of you have already experienced this type of thing. I would just like to connect it to the Nembutsu. It really awakes us to the fact that we are living life. I mentioned that my father lost everything in 1942. He was in his early 30s then. And he was my greatest teacher, even more than others I've mentioned, Peter Kostenbaum, Bill Plotkin, even Houston Smith, Ken Wilber. But like all other Shin Buddhist teachers, he taught me not by so much by his words, but by how he lived his life. In the last few years of his life, he was diminished. He got a staph infection in the hospital. And so his mental state was not quite what it used to be. And in his 90s, as we drove by the San Jose Betsuin, which is in Japantown, he would always just put his hands together and his head would lower. Again, this is without thought. Atama ga sagaru. And so when we practice this intentionally, at some point, our heads would just lower themselves. We would just say, Namo Amida Buddha. As Campbell would say, we are experiencing being alive. We're connected to boundless, infinite life. And we say that because we feel and express gratitude. So please join me in expressing our deepest sense of gratitude by voicing the Nembutsu. Gassho, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.
Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And by way of announcements, we hope you can join us for next week's September 19th Ohigan observance. We're starting at 10 a.m. on Zoom. And to get a link at the end of this video, or you can visit our website. The shortest way to get there is btsd.net. But if technology gets in your way too much, you can also pick up the phone and leave a voicemail for Linda. And we hope that we'll see you there. Also, if you have friends or family who were internees of one of the relocation camps and went through incarceration, please consider coming to the flag signing ceremony that will be at the temple also on September 19th. And this will actually be at the temple in the parking lot. Details are also posted on the btsd.net website. Thank you again. Take care. Bye-bye.